This episode is powered by Safety FM.
This podcast is being sponsored by SafetyConsultantBlueprint.com.
In this week's episode, we'll go over some tips and tricks for conducting a successful business meeting.
Do you want to be a safety consultant? Listen to Dr. Jay Allen of Safety FM give his experience after taking the Safety Consultant Blueprint course.
But I really think that you have a genuine good product there that can really assist people if they're interested in becoming a safety consultant.
Register for the Safety Consultant Blueprint at www.safetyconsultantblueprint.com. Enter code PODCAST for a special discount.
All right, well, welcome to the Safety Consultant Show with Sheldon Primus. I'm your host, Sheldon Primus, and what I do is I help you learn the business of being a safety consultant, or if you are playing the role of a safety consultant for your industry, then I help you successfully do that job. So this week, we're going to talk about conducting meetings. I'm going to give you guys 5 tips that I use when I do a meeting with someone else. And a lot of these are my opinion, so you're going to have to weed out what will work for you and what will not work for you in some of the tips that I give you. However, like everything else, I've been using these tips for a little while, and it's been working pretty good for me. So that's why I decided let me go ahead and formally give you some of these tips. I know I've mentioned a few maybe before in passing, but I will want to make sure that you get this information. So before we go on this week, I've got one of those horrendous colds, so you'll hear a difference in the voice quality. But besides that, I'll try to make sure I edit out any of the hacking or coughing or sniffling so I don't make you sick as you're listening. All right, with that, let's go to tip number 1, which is a basic one, but you'll see this one and you'll know, hey, this is definitely one that I thought of, which is dress for success. So tip number 1 is dressing for success. It means different things to different people. I remember when I first got started, one of the things that I wanted to really do was to have my personality shown as I was delivering content. So whatever the content was, and that was some of my personality in my dress. So I am typically not a truly formal person. I like to be comfortable. I like to be casual. Some of the things that I usually wear is t-shirts and Marvel, DC type of t-shirts, so geeky stuff. And then, of course, shorts, because I live in Florida, so that's pretty much what we wear year-round. So I prefer to have that as my personal dress code. And when I first got started, I really wanted to impress that I am different, and I'm also my own boss. So I would wear some of my earrings at the time, and I do have a left hole pierce, 2, I should say, on my left and 1 on my right, which is probably closed by now, the one on the right, but either or, I would wear, both earrings in my left ear. And so in some cases, I knew for sure I was challenging expectations of professionals, so I did that knowingly, but I also had to make a decision to say, hey, is this earring wearing going to be so much so that it's going to be distracting to the person listening to me when I was giving my presentation or I was doing a class, or is this some sort of distraction for me gaining business? So I eventually stopped doing that only because I didn't want to be a hindrance for my own self and make sure that I don't alienate any clients because of that decision. So that's all going through my mind, it's a bunch of things that go through your head when you're getting ready for a meeting. A lot of it is because you want to make sure that you hit their expectation of what a professional should look like, because you're trying to get through that know you, like you, trust you stage. So yes, some of the things you're wearing has to be calculated, And you could get as calculated as you want, where you have power colors. And mostly power colors are those strong colors like the blues and the reds and some of those really forceful type of gripping colors that you would see out there. And that's one of the ways of doing that. The other way of doing it is you could try to convey certain messages with your style of delivery, so meaning what you're wearing. So, for instance, you could have a three-piece suit to look more traditional for the guys, and for women listening to the show, it might be something as simple as the length of your dress, how appropriate that would be in your first meeting. And I know it just really depends on your personal flair and the personal style that you have. But then there's also a line for business, and it really depends on what type of business you're going to as well. So you're analyzing how you feel about your clothing. You're analyzing of what the client is going to think about your clothing and everything else, your accessories and your earrings and tattoos and all that stuff goes into that first impression, second impression, and all the impressions. But you really have to plan it out as to what is your plan of attack on your clothing. So that's the first thing. And then when you're dressing for success, and let's say you have international clients that you need to meet, or you need to have a visual meeting with over online, like a Zoom or some other webinar or something like that you're going to be seeing, then now you have to think of international type of what's acceptable for them and what's acceptable for you. So it's a cultural issue as well. So that all goes into the dressing for success factor. And it doesn't have to be a suit all the time. It really just has to be what the client feels that suits them and where they want to go with your meeting. And then also for yourself, what you feel the most comfortable in. So it's got to be that balance. So number 2, you want to make sure you get that card ready. So whatever country or culture you have, you do your traditional greeting. And usually in the U.S., then there's a presentation of business cards, if you will, back and forth between the two parties. And this is just contact information. You want to make sure they get that contact information, they have it available. And the presentation of the cards and how you put them together, I did in an early podcast, maybe like 2 or 3 or something, of how to design your actual, whatever the marketing material is that you decide that you're going to use. So the cards is a big thing. And then if you're going to use a flyer, that's another thing that you can use. So utilize that space as best as you can. Use QR codes. That's the code that is a visual hyperlink, and someone will click that with their QR code reader on their phone, and then they will have your contact information directly onto their phone. So you can do that as well. It just really depends on how you want to work that out. But be prepared to have a card. If you don't, then the next thing you're going to do is make sure you have a pen and paper or something and write that out for them so that they can have your contact information. Name, number, email is the basic information that you need. And if you want to, you can write something a little bit about the transaction that you're inquiring about, the type of services you're going to do. So the card is just a basic thing to have, especially if the business is in the U.S., because that's a tradition of the presentation of the cards. So the next thing I would really try to think of, because first you're dressing for success, secondly you have your cards ready, printed to go, and that you have enough for everybody that's there. Then the next thing is you want to make sure that you're thinking critically at all times. So when I say thinking critically at all times, you have to kind of think through what the ask is as to what the need is. So for instance, I had one client that asked me for job hazard analysis for every job title in their city. And it was a city client. So I kind of understood what they wanted, but if you're doing a job hazard analysis or a job safety analysis, that's on a specific task. So the client was asking me to do something that actually didn't really make too much sense, but I kind of understood what they meant. So I had to think critically in that area just to kind of steer them to just let them know what the actual ask should be, if you understand the train of thought there. So what I did is I first instructed on the phone when I was talking to the first round of meetings before I got to the physical meeting. First round is, well, you want a job hazard analysis, and the reason why you want job hazard analysis is to make sure that you are going to not have a person doing a task without thinking of it not only the operational task, but also the safety requirement for performing that task. And that's what the job safety analysis does. It tells you the hazard. Well, first you break everything down into steps, and then after the steps, you pick a hazard for each step and a control for each hazard that you identified for each step. So in thinking of a job description, each job description has its own makeup of individual tasks, and then the individual tasks are what makes up what the person does for a living. So what I ended up having to do and telling the client is I could look at all the different job descriptions for your entity, and then we're going to ask each representative member from your actual job descriptions, which are going to be pretty much, if you're a city, it would be the police force, the fire department, parks or directs, the wastewater, any of the other utilities. So this is sectors or divisions that I'll be looking for, but then I would have to ask, well, all right, for instance, the police department. If I was a typical policeman, then what are the jobs that I'll be doing? So let's say it could be traffic control. If it's an emergency and the lights go out, you have to do that. That's going to create its own hazards. If you have a suspect and you need to apprehend that suspect and get them into custody, that's going to have its own hazards, its own job listing. Then you think about anything else that a police department can do. All those different tasks will have its own procedures, step by step by step, and then each procedure will have a hazard that becomes exposed, and then you would have to have some sort of control mechanism set up for the hazard that was just exposed at that step. So that's the JSA. So I had to explain that to the client first. So the next thing was, well, instead of just trying to do one JSA for each job description, well, I have them give me their top 3, maybe their top 4, in some cases maybe top 5 hazardous jobs that they have to do for their job description. And then from there, I could break down those tasks, which are going to come to me through a standard operating procedure. And then I'll break down those tasks into a job hazard analysis, and then teach their staff how to do exactly what I just did, so that not only are they paying for a certain amount of job hazard analysis, but then they'll also get the education needed for them to do this themselves. So that was the thought process behind that. And using critical thinking and active listening, I was able to hear what they thought they wanted, and then able to translate into something that's tangible. I could start with billing hours, something that's going to represent exactly what they actually need, and then give them the proposal that way. So at that meeting, if I wasn't thinking about critical thinking, by the time I got out of that meeting, I wouldn't have the information that I needed to give them a proposal, and then I would have to call back, and then I would have to follow up in some way to make sure that I got the right thing. So don't want to do that. So that's your third step, is think critically. So first, we're dressing for success. Secondly, you want to be prepared with that business card. Thirdly, we are going to always think critically throughout that business transaction. And then the fifth thing is to speak up. Yep, as easy it is speaking up. Because I sometimes see where people go through a full business meeting and they're supposed to be the consultants, the expert, and they're basically letting the client talk about the needs that they need, but not interjecting some of the things that you are trained to understand and to see and to give them some sort of counseling on. And it's okay, even in your initial meeting, if you're giving them some sort of consulting, because that's what they're trying to find out, is if you are appropriately trained for doing the job they want to get you to do as a safety and health consultant. So speak up. Tell them your mind, making sure that you are listening actively to them, thinking critically about the true ask that they actually need, not always what they tell you, and then making sure that you're respectful at delivering that message that you're really understanding, as far as being getting to understand what their safety need is. So speak up. There's plenty of meetings where, I let things go back and forth as far as banter with clients amongst themselves. But then I chime in and say, well, while you're thinking of this, you also need this consideration, or what you're talking about now is good, but to be OSHA compliant or regulatory compliant, you also have to address this scenario. So that's when you make sure you chime in and let them know that you are experienced enough for you to have some opinion in this initial meeting that will lead them to say, hey, we need to hire this person more because we didn't even consider that. And here they are making sure that we know this. So that's another thing. And then lastly, this is as simple and as basic as it comes, but you want to make sure that you keep writing all the special things that come up within these meetings. So one of the things that'll come up will be follow-up material. So you want to make sure that you write down exactly the things that you're supposed to follow up. So when you get back, you're going to send an email to this person or an email to that person regarding maybe, for instance, for me, I had this one client that needed some color and for her process piping. However, when I went through the facility doing a mock OSHA audit, that's one of the things that I brought up, was there was no continuity in the colors, as well as there wasn't anything that showed me that red denoted fire and blue for water, and they didn't have any of that stuff. So they actually had colors, just whatever paint was available. They just slapped that on their pipe and they were good. So I had to show them the ANSI document related to color coding of process piping, and then making sure they know there is some leeway in that for you to put in colors that you use independently of someone else, or if it's something that's special to your industry, you could do that. Like, for instance, I used to work in reclaimed water, and that's Pantone purple is the color of reclaimed water in the U.S. So therefore, you could see that color anywhere if you're aware of what it means, and you know for sure that that water source that you're looking at is treated effluent from a wastewater facility, and that's all by looking at the colors. So it's important for you to have that right. So when I was making notes, and during the meeting, I had to make sure I had notes to follow up specifically for things that came out in the meeting, and then also some things that I was thinking about when I was researching after the meeting. So that was all because of the notes I took. I had to make sure that I took very good detailed notes, and I had to make sure that I was understanding what are some deliverables that I need to do for this client at the end of the meeting, so that they could make a informed decision as to what to do next. So that's all goes into how to conduct a meeting. So if you are about to have a meeting, you really want to start thinking about these points, these 5 simple points, so that you can have a successful meeting in the end. When we come back, we have our tip of the week, and the tip of the week is going to include one other point. See, we're throwing in one other point. So we'll do the tip of the week when we come on back.
Hi, everybody. Todd Conklin. I know lots of you get your information while you drive down the road or sit on planes or sit in meetings and look interested. And now you should know that 3 of my books are available for your listening pleasure on Audible. With the help of Jay Allen and Safety FM, we've produced 3 of the books, Workplace Fatalities, The 5 Principles of Human Performance, and my very first book, Simple Revolutionary Acts, and they're available now where you get audiobooks.
The tip of the week goes with you're conducting a meeting. So one of the things I did want to mention is go to the restroom prior to actually getting there and shaking hands and meeting with everybody, because that's going to be a big difference, and it'll be a professionalism thing. So what I do, sometimes I do a lot of driving, so as soon as I get close to the neighborhood that I need to be for meeting a client, I'll stop at their nearest whatever store it is, gas up, use the restroom, wash my hands real thoroughly, then I will go ahead and if I need to get a coffee or whatever I need to do all that right there. So by the time I actually get into the meeting, sitting with everybody, I'm not worried so much about personal needs where I can't focus in on the meeting. So that is the tip of the week. Just go ahead and take care of something really simple before you even get to your additional meeting, which is going ahead and using the restroom, and checking yourself out, getting yourself ready for that meeting prior to actually shaking hands for the first time. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. And if you are on iTunes, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could do an iTunes review of this podcast. If you like it, share it with a friend. I'm just trying to build some more followers right now. So please share this, and that'll be a great help to me. Take that as you like what I'm doing. All right, have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you next Monday.
This episode has been powered by Safety FM.
This podcast is being sponsored by SafetyConsultantBlueprint.com.